Hello, Internet, and thank you for joining me today. So, recently I watched Hazbin Hotel, and I have to get some things off my chest and out of my brain, so we're going to talk about it. So, originally, I saw Hazbin Hotel, the pilot, on YouTube back in 2019 when it first came out, and everyone else saw it. Yeah, it was pretty neat. My first experience with the series was the pilot back in 2019. It was recommended I saw it being recommended by people like Just Stop or Saberspark and a few other YouTubers that I forget the name of. Anyway, I watched that, and then obviously, like everyone else, I was eagerly awaiting the new series, the rest of it. However, that wouldn't come for several years. So, like everyone else, I watched some of Hell of the Boss. And Hell of the Boss, eh, long story short, it's okay. I would recommend watching it if you watch Hazbin Hotel and think, hey, some more of that, please. But go. When I first saw the pilot, I had some initial thoughts like, wow, this seems like something out of the early 2000s. It's not necessarily an animation, but in its storytelling and its design and its humor. And it reminded me of stuff that I watched back then, which at the time, sure, I was a child, 40 something, whatever. Stuff like Invader Zim or Happy Tree Friends or South Park. I don't know. I'm having trouble thinking of the exact thing that I want to compare this to. But the early 2000s felt a lot like this show. Jonan Vasquez was really big. He came out with Johnny the Homicidal Maniac, and he was doing stuff that was a lot like what this show is kind of giving off in terms of its vibe, quote unquote. Uh, but this is kind of the idea I had going into it, the impressions I got from the pilot. And so, fast forward now to 2024, and all of a sudden we're able to see the whole thing, or at least I'm able to see the whole thing because I watched it when it finally finished airing. I didn't watch it as it was coming out, so to speak. So I binged the whole thing about a week ago, and I sat down with the first episode, and the opening monologue had me thinking, okay, so instead of early 2000s edgy kind of humor with extra cursing and all that, we're just going to rape Milton. Like, we're just going to take John Milton out of his grave and skull fuck him. Cool. You haven't softened me yet. My dick's still right there at half mast. However, we fast forward to the last episode, which this only took me, let's call it 4 hours, just to be non-precise. And I felt very differently about it. And so I felt like I had to finally get my shit together and come down and make my first YouTube video. So this is my first foray into YouTube. This is my first foray talking about any kind of visual medium, visual art, so to speak. And so we'll just get into it. Not to delay talking about the series any longer, I do just want to briefly touch here and understand that there have been some controversies around here. I'll kind of talk about them as I get deeper into this video, but I just want everyone to know up front before I say much else that yes, I do understand that some people find this show offensive, and it's not just your people that think that the subject matter is taboo or whatever, but people think that it doesn't handle certain situations very well, or they think that it's insensitive or even victim blaming in some cases. However, I just want to acknowledge that those people exist. You're allowed to have that opinion. I just don't happen to share in those opinions because I don't have those experiences. But you're free to feel however you need to about those controversies, those scenes. It's not that now that I've addressed the controversy and gotten that out of the way, I just want to give you a really quick synopsis on my thoughts on Hazbin Hotel. And honestly, my overall thoughts on it is it's good. I think it's worth watching. I, in fact, plan on watching it again once I'm done with this video, which is taking me a lot longer than I thought it would. But hey, this is my first attempt. We're going to see how this goes. If I haven't mentioned it before, this is my first video. So I'm not going to have a really concrete idea on how I want to structure this. And so I'm just going to jump right into a few things here. The first thing I want to say is that I'm not going to give this a hard and rigid structure. It's kind of just my free flowing thoughts, and I made some notes, and I'm going to go off those notes. All right, with no further ado, here we go. To start off with, the music. It's kind of the elephant in the room because every single episode, I believe, has two songs at least. Some might have three, one of them might have one. However, it's full of music. I've actually, since the pilot, been listening to a lot of Vivzy Pop music. Vivzy Pop is the one who makes Hazbin Hotel. She's kind of like the one that came up with the idea. She's worked on it for a long time, from my understanding, and she does a lot with music. Her big breakout thing was actually a music video. And so, naturally, there's going to be a lot of music in her show. And I gotta say, I wasn't really that impressed with all the music. All of the music was satisfactory. I didn't think anything stood out as bad. However, I don't think that it's a big highlight of the show. I'm not going to run out and download the soundtrack, and listen to every song multiple times. It's just not something that is within me to do that to begin with, but this music didn't necessarily spur me to do that. Not that there's anything wrong with the music, again, however, I just didn't really connect with it. It's not 100% my thing. The one exception to that, and one caveat that I will give this whole series, is that the song Loser, that everyone seems to be kind of having a controversy over, that seems to be everyone's really big, like, this is not a great way to represent this subject matter song, is actually my favorite. It's not that the controversy itself makes me think that, but it's mostly that the music is very nice and Keith David sings in it. And Keith David can do just about anything he wants. He's that amazing. If Keith David ran. Listen, Keith David can do no wrong. If Keith David got into politics, he would be president of the world. If Keith David decided that he was going to be a baker instead of an actor, there would be no world hunger. If Keith David got into porn, there would be one continuous orgasm from now until the day we all died. But such is the power of Keith David. And he can elevate this soundtrack to the point where I do actually go onto YouTube Music and like his song so that it shows up in my liked playlist and I listen to it on my way to work. From Keith David and him being amazing, I want to move on to animation. If you want a higher level of animation critique, I would say go to Just Stop, SaberSpark. I've mentioned them before, but there's a ton of people on YouTube that actually know about animation, and I can barely write my name legibly. So let's not talk about my animation, but I did have some thoughts on it. Uh, Compared to the YouTube pilot, the Amazon Prime series has definitely simplified things, which I view as a good thing. It means that we get a very expressive show that is still undeniably its own style. However, we get to see more of it. Uh, Animation is amazingly expensive. Everyone knows that. It's no secret to anybody. And looking on Google, I think that the budget for this whole show was about 24 million, which isn't a lot for 8 episodes. And you can kind of feel that, but at the same time, it's the simplified designs that they came up with still look very good, especially when you compare it up to something like, I don't know, The Simpsons, for instance. The Simpsons is very generic, and Vivzi's design of all of these characters in the show seem to be very, very distinct and different. Everyone looks different. There's not a whole lot of copy paste characters. Even like the backgrounds and stuff look amazing, in my opinion. And this is something I've wanted to talk about for a while, but honestly, Hazbin Hotel, at least this first season, is definitely a $24 million show. And what I mean by that is that when you look at something like on Disney Plus, let's just use She Hulk for an example. All right. She Hulk supposedly had a budget of $200 million. That's an insane amount of money. That's more money than anyone that is listening to this will ever see in their life. But we used it all on a character like She Hulk. Honestly, she's not worth it. She's not a $200 million character. She's not a $100 million character. And I don't know, quick sidebar, but I don't know if all of these numbers are 100% correct. I literally took the first number I saw on Google and ran with it because I'm disorganized and lazy. But moving on, I think She Hulk is another $24 million show, or at least it should have been, because I actually really love She Hulk as a character in the comics. I read a lot of them as a kid. I read a lot of them when I was a young adult, and I was kind of looking forward to seeing it come to life. And then they just ruined it. Like there's no way they made $200 million off of the She-Hulk show. There was never going to be a scenario where they made $200 million off of the She-Hulk show. It's what we call niche content. It's called niche content. And let me define niche content in my own little world here. Niche content is something that's not everyone is going to get, but can create enough of an audience to be worth making. Your high school drawings, I would not consider to be niche content. It's just content. The range that your high school drawings are going to reach is going to be limited to your friends and family if you're that brave to show them. Now, whenever we're talking about professional niche content like this, we're talking about characters like Moon Knight, characters like She Hulk, characters like Gambit from the X Men. I feel like you get what I mean by all these niche characters, but you can make content based on them. There's an audience big enough to support them, but not enough for like your dad or your grandpa or whoever to go see it. Wide audience appeal. Like Iron Man was honestly a risk that paid off, and he's kind of the isolation there. He needed the likes of Thor and Captain America and all these other characters to come in to make the Avengers, right? Even though Iron Man probably has surpassed their popularity at this point. But I think when it comes to stuff like Hazbin Hotel and She Hulk, we need to be looking at a realistic number when it comes to creating it, the budget for these shows. And so, more to my point, that I think that Hazbin Hotel being a $24 million show and the music, the animation, all of that being reflective of that is a good thing. Because ultimately, what I want is for this show to make a modest profit. Let's just say that Amazon throws the 24 million at it and it comes back and it says, "Hey, I made $75 million." Cool. Greenlit for a second season. Why not? Everyone needs content for their streaming services. Vivzy needs work. Everyone's happy. Everyone's animating, everyone's working. So we, the consumers, are going to get more of this show. There's already rumors of season 2 coming around. I think it's a little early to say exactly what's going to happen story-wise, but this gives me a great opportunity to jump to that story. Now that I've successfully segued into the story portion of this video, I feel like I have a lot to talk about. To address the big elephant in the room that some people are going to have a problem with, this show has a lot of gay, trans, and otherwise represented T characters. This show does great by them. It's something I've wanted to see in media for a while, that we have characters that just are gay, or are trans, or are insert attribute here. I constantly see in my media that it's like, oh, it's important that this character is the way they are because it means this in the real world. And as far as Hazbin Hotel goes, the real world doesn't exist. These are characters, this is the way they are, and this is the story we're telling with them. It was a breath of fresh air to see all of that. Because honestly, I don't feel like we get nearly enough of it. We're constantly being inundated with, oh, this is our first this character. This is important because of this real world thing. No. Great job, Hazbin Hotel, for just saying, this is the story I'm telling. I don't care what real world ramifications it has. This is the story. I just ended the series feeling a little bit worried that they felt like they had to. Like you had a different story that you wanted to tell, but you ended up not telling that story because you felt like you had to tell all those dick jokes. And that just kind of makes me sad. Now that I've explained that, let me move on to the actual plot of this thing. And it's kind of messy. It's all over the place. The biggest problem with the whole show in general is its pacing. Pacing is going to be the biggest problem with this show, partially because it's a very short show. Again, only 8 episodes are out now. We don't have another season. We don't have a guarantee of another season. And each of these 8 episodes is only 22 minutes. So we don't get a lot of time to sit down with each and every character and just understand every single facet of them. Which, a lot of shows have done a lot with a lot less. I think that this show tries its best to balance it all, but I think overall it's a passion project. It's a project that comes from a deep understanding of Vivzy as a person. She's wanted to tell the story for a long, long time, as I understand it. And so when she was given this show, it almost seems like, now that I'm able to look at it and kind of break it down, it looks like she had tons of ideas. She had reams of paper dedicated to everything she wanted to tell. And then they made her condense it all down into 4 hours. That's obviously going to be hard to do. I feel like they did the best that they could, but I feel like if they had kind of cut out a few characters, or maybe just cut down on a few subplots and left things a bit more ambiguous, then we could have gotten a more direct story. We would have gotten like 3 or 4 main characters that we got to know very well and understand their motivations and their stories a whole lot better. But going back to this other hand that has all these dirty jokes on it that only exist to be dirty and don't further the narrative, we kind of get the feeling that we could have sacrificed some of these jokes in order to have more plot. Let me give you a kind of spoilery example. Within the last two episodes, there's a conflict between two of the main characters that I really felt like came out of left field. Like, you find out that this person's been lying this whole time, but then by the beginning of the last episode, which is like 20 minutes later, showtime, it literally doesn't matter. We're literally over it. It's just gone. The fact that they've lied this entire time, which within the universe of these characters, it's been decades, hundreds of years, perhaps. But this betrayal should be affecting the characters a lot more than it does. It just kind of has to start and stop there at the very end because we had to fit in 3 episodes worth of dick jokes, which we could have skipped, but we didn't. And, that's fine. If that's a story you want to tell, that's a story you want to tell. And I commend you for telling the story the way you wanted to do it. I used to love Zack Snyder, his early career to be specific. Dawn of the Dead, 300, Watchmen, and then finally Sucker Punch. And Sucker Punch was a movie that when it first came out, literally everyone shit on it. Because it's a very confusing movie, honestly. It's taken me several years to even begin to understand that movie. Because it goes in all different kinds of directions, and it's got very poorly explained, abstract ideas. But again, it's the limitations that Hollywood sets on creatives that they can't just give this guy endless money and endless time to work on a magnum opus. And so it becomes this very confusing sort of ramble. Not unlike this video. I have to just get something out. But I feel like Sucker Punch has become kind of a cult movie because I think more and more people seem to understand that this was Zack Snyder's baby. He needed to tell this story. This was the story he was thinking about when he was doing all the other movies. And so when he finally got the chance to make it, he was just so excited that the story kind of got away from him. And he was making everything with visuals, and he was making everything with the actors, and honestly, all of that hard work shows through. Now, do I think Sucker Punch is some masterpiece? Absolutely not. But it's still a good movie that I will watch again and again and again, and I think I'm going to do the same with Hazbin Hotel. So, to kind of summarize my little rambling session here, uh, I was inspired by Hazbin Hotel to make this video, to finally come onto YouTube and make my voice heard. Because often I will be sitting here listening to a podcast, listening to a video about people talking about a movie or a show or a book, and I really want to throw my hat into the ring. And this has given me the inspiration to move forward with that idea. How do I feel about the overall series? Honestly, from watching it from pilot to sideshow that came out first, oddly, to finally its season 1 finale, I don't know that there's a ton left in this story. There's definitely gas in the tank, but I don't know if the interest is going to be there because it's just a little too weird to keep throwing out there. I think someone needs to come in and kind of focus this story. If they do another season, someone should be there to kind of put the reins on it. Not unlike what they did with Star Wars, because first Star Wars movie came out, everyone was throwing ideas, bouncing ideas everywhere, and then the second one came out, and that had a bit more focus to it, which meant that everything turned out way better. So here's hoping that the season 2 of Hazbin Hotel is the Empire Strikes Back of itself. I'm Ice King. Thank you for listening. Have a great day.